The wind howled through the busy airport as the early morning rush began. Passengers shuffled through security lines, some in a hurry, others groggy from early flights. Among them was an older man in worn-out jeans, a slightly oversized hoodie, and scuffed sneakers. He carried a faded backpack slung over his shoulder and looked around as if taking in every detail. His unkempt beard and tired eyes made him look like any other traveler trying to get from one place to another. But what no one knew was that this man was no ordinary passenger. He was Logan Reynolds, billionaire owner of SkyLux Airlines, and he was about to test his own company in a way no executive ever dared to. Logan had built SkyLux from the ground up, turning a struggling regional airline into an international luxury brand. But lately he had heard troubling reports, stories of discrimination, arrogance, and poor service creeping into his company. Employees forgetting the very values he had instilled. He had read emails, listened to complaints, even watched footage from security cameras. But he wanted to see it firsthand. And so, dressed as an average traveler, he bought an economy class ticket for a random flight and walked into his own world, unnoticed. Approaching the check-in counter, he pulled out his printed ticket and waited his turn. The line moved slowly, and when it was finally his turn, he stepped forward. A young woman, her name tag reading Cindy, barely glanced up from her computer. "Ticket and ID?" she said, her tone impatient. Logan handed them over, watching her expression. She barely looked at him before handing his ID back. "You're in 32B, middle seat. No upgrades available. Boarding starts in 20 minutes. He nodded, observing her body language. No smile, no greeting, no effort to make the interaction pleasant. Just another number in the system. But he let it go and walked towards security. The real test would come once he was on the plane. As he boarded, he shuffled along with the rest of the passengers, his worn sneakers barely making a sound on the jet bridge. The flight attendants at the door were busy chatting with each other, barely acknowledging passengers. He stepped onto the plane and made his way to his seat in the cramped economy cabin. The moment he sat down, the passenger beside him, a well-dressed businessman, gave him a once-over and wrinkled his nose before turning away. Logan smirked slightly. People really did judge by appearances. A few minutes later, the intercom crackled to life. "Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome aboard SkyLux Flight 287 to Miami. Our estimated flight time is 2 hours and 35 minutes. Please ensure your seatbelts are fastened and your tray tables are up." As the plane filled up, Logan observed the cabin crew. A tall, slender flight attendant named Vanessa seemed to be leading the team. She walked down the aisle with an air of authority, but her face bore a permanent scowl. She barely made eye contact with passengers, moving mechanically through the cabin. When she reached Logan's row, she stopped, looking at him as if he were an inconvenience. "Sir, you need to place your backpack under the seat or in the overhead bin." Logan nodded, tucking his bag under the seat. "Of course." She lingered a moment, eyeing him with distaste before moving on. He watched as she interacted with other passengers. When she spoke to the businessman next to him, her tone changed completely. She smiled, her voice turning soft and pleasant. "Sir, can I get you anything before we take off?" she asked, leaning slightly toward him. The businessman shook his head and she moved on. Logan had seen enough already, but the flight was just beginning. As the plane took off, Vanessa and the other attendants started the beverage service. Logan waited patiently as they moved through the cabin. When they finally reached his row, Vanessa barely glanced at him. "What do you want?" she asked, her voice flat. "Just a water, please," Logan said politely. She grabbed a bottle, tossed it onto his tray table without a word, and moved on. He watched as she served the businessman next to him with a warm smile, even offering him a free snack. The difference was stark. Logan clenched his jaw. This was exactly the kind of behavior he had feared was creeping into his airline. As the flight continued, he saw more. An elderly woman struggling to get her bag into the overhead compartment was ignored. A young couple asking for assistance with their baby was met with impatience. And when a black passenger requested a simple seat change due to discomfort, he was met with an annoyed sigh and a dismissive shake of the head from Vanessa. The breaking point came when a mother traveling with her son, who had special needs, requested warm milk for him. Vanessa rolled her eyes and said, "We don't have time for special requests. You should have prepared better. The mother's face fell in embarrassment, and Logan felt his blood boil. He took a deep breath, controlling his emotions. The flight was almost over. Soon, Vanessa and her crew would learn who he really was. But for now, he watched, waiting for the perfect moment to reveal the truth. The seatbelt sign came on as the captain announced the final descent. Vanessa walked down the aisle one last time, her expression indifferent, unaware that the man she had looked down upon for the last 2 hours was the very person who signed her paycheck. As the plane touched down, Logan leaned back in his seat, a slow smile forming. They had no idea what was coming. The passengers began gathering their belongings, stretching as they prepared to deboard. Logan waited patiently, watching as Vanessa and the other crew members casually ignored the passengers who weren't in first class. He adjusted his hoodie and glanced at the cockpit door. He was about to make his move. What happened next would change the course of these employees' lives forever. Logan remained seated, watching as the other passengers filed past him, eager to exit the plane. Vanessa barely acknowledged anyone who wasn't in first class, chatting pleasantly with the more affluent-looking passengers while dismissing those in economy. She had no idea that her most important passenger was still seated, quietly observing. As the last of the passengers left, Logan slowly stood, stretching as if he had all the time in the world. He slung his faded backpack over his shoulder and made his way toward the front, where Vanessa was standing near the exit door, casually scrolling through her phone. He stopped just a few feet away, allowing the moment to stretch. Vanessa glanced up, annoyed that someone from economy was still lingering. "Sir, if you need assistance, you should have asked earlier," she said flatly, her impatience evident. Logan tilted his head, a smirk forming at the corner of his lips. "Actually, I was wondering if I could speak to the captain." Vanessa raised an eyebrow. "The captain?" she repeated, looking him up and down. "Why would you need to speak to him?" "I just have a few things to discuss," Logan said, his tone calm but firm. Vanessa rolled her eyes. "Sir, the captain is busy, and passengers aren't allowed in the cockpit after landing. If you have a complaint, you can take it up with customer service." Logan chuckled softly. "Oh, I will, but I'd rather do it in person." Before Vanessa could respond, the cockpit door opened and Captain Harris stepped out, still adjusting the cuffs of his uniform. He paused when he saw Logan standing there and then did a double take. His expression shifted from casual to shocked recognition. "Mr. Reynolds?" Vanessa's face twisted in confusion. "Mr. Reynolds?" she echoed, looking between the captain and the man she had been so dismissive toward. Logan nodded, offering a small smile. "Captain Harris, good flight today?" The captain straightened immediately. "Yes, sir. We had smooth skies. I didn't realize you were on board." "That was the point," Logan said simply. He turned his attention back to Vanessa, whose face had lost all color. "I'm Logan Reynolds, owner of SkyLux Airlines." Vanessa's lips parted, but no words came out. The smug confidence she had carried throughout the flight crumbled in an instant. The other flight attendants, who had been whispering nearby, froze. "I've heard complaints about how some of my employees treat passengers," Logan continued, his voice smooth but laced with quiet authority. "I wanted to see it for myself. And I have." Vanessa opened her mouth, her hands trembling slightly. "Mr. Reynolds, I had no idea." "That I was your boss?" Logan interrupted, raising an eyebrow. "That shouldn't have mattered. Every passenger should receive respect, regardless of their seat class." Vanessa swallowed hard, her previous arrogance vanishing. I wasn't trying to be rude," she tried to defend herself. Logan sighed. "Vanessa, I watched you treat passengers differently based on their appearances. I watched you dismiss an elderly woman, ignore a struggling mother, and refuse basic decency to paying customers. That's unacceptable." The other flight attendants shifted uncomfortably, clearly worried about the consequences of being complicit. Logan turned to Captain Harris. "Make sure the rest of your crew knows as well. I expect immediate changes. And Vanessa?" He looked at her directly. "You're relieved of your position, effective immediately." Vanessa gasped. "Wait, what?" "Sir, please, I can change. I don't tolerate discrimination or poor service in my airline," Logan said firmly. "And I certainly don't allow my employees to treat passengers as less than human." Tears welled in Vanessa's eyes as the reality of the situation hit her. She had gone from the top of the chain to out of a job in a matter of minutes. Logan didn't wait for further pleas. He turned to the other attendants. Take note. I expect better. We can't call ourselves a luxury airline if we fail to provide even basic kindness. With that, he turned and walked down the jet bridge, leaving behind a stunned crew. The weight of his presence lingered even as he disappeared into the terminal. Word would spread fast about how the owner of SkyLux had gone undercover and cleaned house. As Logan stepped outside, the morning sun hit his face. He took a deep breath, feeling a sense of satisfaction. There was still work to be done, but today he had taken the first step in reminding his company of its values, and he would make sure they never forgot again. Logan walked through the airport terminal, noting the SkyLux branding everywhere. He approached a customer service desk where a young employee, David, greeted him with a bright smile. Welcome to SkyLux Airlines. How can I assist you today? Logan smiled back. Just wanted to see how your team handles customer service. David nodded enthusiastically. We strive to make every passenger's experience a positive one, sir. Glad to hear that, Logan said, pulling out his phone. Keep up the good work. David had no idea who Logan was, but he had already made a better impression than Vanessa. Logan turned and walked toward the exit. There was much to fix, but there was also hope. His company could be saved.